The dates of these are somewhat fluid. I tend to date the work when I send them off to be framed, but for this grouping, it's a little different. There was some passage of time between when I did them and when they were sent to be framed. These were sketched one after the other in quick succession. The sketches are composed of fine lines using a fine point pen, size 1.5. I love doing these types of sketches because it's like meditation for me. I can get lost in the process. I completed these and did nothing with them and found them sometime later and decided I should exhibit them. That's when they were sent off for framing. I did these sketches before I started painting. My sketches had this type of a look. There is another one that I had a strong connection with. It's called Wombin. It was with this particular piece that I decided to transform it by using paint media. I just explained the ink sketches that I had made. When I was doing those, there was one in particular that I wanted to challenge myself and paint, but I was artistically blocked. I had taken classes, but I didn't have any ideas. I decided to paint this and just follow a creative process. I did one, but it was a struggle. It was a collage and I didn't like it, so I gave up on it. This is truly my first painting. I wanted to copy the ink sketch and transform it into canvas. It's called Wombin. There's an interesting story that goes along with this. I performed in sign language with a female singing artist. She had a deaf grandmother who also taught at the School for the Deaf, where I attended as a child, and she knew me when I was young. When I went into the mainstream, she tutored the interpreters who worked with me, and her grandmother identified me as an artist and a writer at a very young age. We lost contact, and years later, her granddaughter made a CD. Somehow she found me through a cousin and asked me to perform with her. I had written a poem called Wombin, and I asked her to perform it. We rehearsed it together and talked about the song and its rhythm, and we did it. She performed with a guitar, and I performed in ASL. It was an inspirational experience for me. Each of these pieces has a deep meaning for me. The top one was written in ink, and the bottom painted as a composite. It was the last thing I did before I took a year off and got into music and drumming with another group where I had the freedom of self-expression. That was an experience that fit more closely with my identity and gave me a lot of freedom. I feel a strong connection to these, and that's why I haven't sold them. When painting, I learned that I couldn't replicate the ink sketch process with paint. Painting encompasses movement, which adds an interesting element to the process. In this piece, here on the right, are the four natural elements of water, earth, fire, and sky. This is a womb, and you can see the cord with the female figure. Her hair is off to the right as she looks to the left. She has her back to us. She doesn't want us to look at her. She's protecting and covering herself up. On her leg, you can see a face that symbolizes the masculine. It's like part of her life, but it's not in the foreground. It's more of a support element. I experimented with shapes in this piece. You can see here at the bottom the bubble shapes and the line in the color. You'll notice a lot of use of primary colors. I didn't really blend colors too much with this piece. Over here on the right, I blended some green and some browns. Here's some purple. But for the most part, I wanted to use a primary palette. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't notice that before. You're picking up the anchor shape in this image. This was actually done in 2001, 10 years ago. I consider the anchor to be a new shape for me. Wow. This is not for sale either, because it's one of my first paintings. I have a very strong connection to it. I feel that this piece marks my emergence and transformation as an artist. On the top again, there's a lot of use of primary with some secondary color, green and orange, similar style throughout. You see the woman's back with the flower coming out of her front. We see her face, but not her torso, similar to the previous one. There's a sun in the upper left-hand corner. Both this and the previous one had a flowing movement from bottom to top, from left to right. The previous one bigger, this one smaller. For the bottom one, I experimented. I was on a beach and I decided to mix sand and lake water with the pigment. You can see that the color was affected. The tones are subdued and more natural. Clearly, they're not striking primary colors. The shape on top is like a fish. It's searching underwater, or it could be in the space in the universe. It's called Floating Across Time, and it shows the figure's movement in time. This is connected to another work of art that started from this idea, but it wasn't completed until much later. But the origination of it came from this idea. During the interview, I talked about an oil painting free expression workshop that reignited my passion in the arts. The date on this says 2001, which is interesting. I always thought it was later. I might have put down the wrong date. Again, this was an oil painting workshop that taught the techniques of free expression, and this was the workshop that reignited me. I learned a lot about color mixing and playing with techniques. I blended colors in a more complicated way. The colors were infused with one another. In earlier pieces, the colors were minimally blended. Also, in previous works, there tended to be one central concept. Here, there are three different concepts or perspectives. These are all stories in the development of this piece. The lines on the bottom and on the right separate and section off the piece to add interest. The organic shape in the lower right includes three shapes. 3 is an important number for me. A rope is stronger with 3 strands of cord, or 2 people may be strong, but when the third element of love is added, they become stronger. The circle on the left is the circle of life, and the 3 circles behave like gears. They are surrounded by a house with an organically shaped roof indicating protection. The blue section represents water, and in the upper left is the sun. Both are interrelated. The figure in the water is sleeping and at rest. The figure of the sun is the caretaker. It's like 2 perspectives of myself, joined yet separate. It's like the 2 parts of oneself. They take turns being the caretaker of the other. On the lower right, the shapes also represent the chakras and their deeper connectedness to achieve balance. There are circular shapes within the 3 circles. My explanation of each of these elements seems vague. I really haven't analyzed them in depth, but if someone else were to do so, they could tell me what they discovered. You'll notice more complexity in this piece. As I blended and infused the colors in the last piece, the colors here are infused as well. I played with these circular shapes and swirls in the lower left, which represent water. The figures are mermaids. I made this as a gift for 2 of my female friends who were getting married. They intertwine with their love and join at the apex with the bright light which showers down upon them. The sky is above them, and the lines frame them within the piece, similar to the lines added to the previous piece. On the top are swirling shapes similar to the shapes that were used in my previous piece as well. The faces are clearly female. Their facial texture is darker. The shadow adds dimension to the face. This is experimental. I used acrylics and then painted over the acrylics with oil. The background rectangles in blue are done with acrylics. The human figure is in oil. It was a very interesting process. For some reason, I struggled with this painting. The figure's body tone really bothered me. I wanted a brown tone so that it would stand out, and I worked and reworked the colors, and I finally gave up. I put it aside, and this was never done to exhibit in an art show, but I felt it was important to include because it shows the evolution and transformation of my technique. This is entitled Maternal Buddha. Its arms portray strength and power, which supports its abdomen, the earth. The eyes are closed to represent sleeping and a deeper connection. The breasts could be male or female. The rectangles in the background represent autism. They represent autism, the many pieces of it. When I look at that background, it's obvious that it's autism to me. And I chose this background because at that time I liked stained glass and I wanted to use that as an inspiration for the background. For this one, I continued using oil as the media for the painting. In the Maternal Buddha piece, I incorporated a stained glass effect, and I again wanted to continue using stained glass elements within my work. You can see the stained glass section is separated and complex, whereas the background is simple. Now my work rarely incorporates a sterile background. Again, we see female figures. They are looking at one another. The smaller figure is making an offering to the larger figure. You can see the tree in the middle of the stained glass portion. This piece is called Glass Tree. There is increased complexity within this piece. However, at the same time, the composition is rather simple. The colors are more complex. There is a reduced amount of primary colors used within this piece. This is an oil. You'll see many repeated elements. The wavy lines and swirls at top are repeated. Also with this piece, as well as previous ones, many of the elements are weighted towards the right. There are also lines separating portions of the piece. With the Womban piece, there was a poem associated with it. The text was not a part of the painting. In this one, text is painted onto the piece. This describes the space between heaven and hell, where the roots are pulling the figure downward and the figure is holding onto the swirls above. It's needing to make peace with both portions of the self. The figure has its back to us. We don't see its face. In this particular piece, I experimented with perspective. I wanted to show the depth of the wings. You don't see perspective in my earlier pieces. So you'll see perspective experimented in this piece, particularly in the wings, but also at the bottom. It was quite challenging. These two are similar in style to the group of three I previously described, where I experimented with and incorporated acrylics and rubbing. I have several others that I started but didn't complete. These use the rubbing technique and they are complete. They don't have dominant female figures, they're more abstract. There are people within them. The colors are darker. The people are more in profile, there is less detail. Most of my paintings are unplanned when I start. I let the process lead me. Most of them are unplanned, and these two obviously did not have a plan as I began. As I started to rub the acrylics, I saw the possibilities and the shapes emerge. And so you can see the end product here. Both have horizontal layers, and they're both narrow. They give the feeling of continuing above and below. In the left one, you'll see beginning at the bottom a boat in water. Above that, people looking in different directions. Above them, space. And on top, two faces looking in opposite directions like the subconscious. On the right, you can see a tree under the sky. You see two people in conversation, other people in conversation. The moonlight suggests that the conversation has gone on and on. The roots of the tree continue through it. A person is looking as if in the mirror into the water. With this, because of the rubbing technique, you don't see the brush strokes. And I liked the blending rather than the harsh brush strokes. This technique was very interesting. These are oil on the small scale. You'll notice I started with oils, then I got into acrylics and the rubbing technique, and now I'm back to oils again. On the top is a female. On the bottom, the moon's face is in the tree. It's similar to the trees in the previous two, but this tree is more obvious. On the bottom, you see the moon and the clouds. On the top, there is a bug. With both, I experimented with colors and 3D effects. I incorporated perspective. The top painting, Away from Home, is as if the person's in a different world. The bottom one is a sleeping moon. And I continued with oils. This next one had an incredible impact on my work. When you look at my work in succession, you see that I have incorporated the human form. With the two layered paintings that I just described, I started using people differently within my work. With this one, I dedicated myself to focusing completely on people, whether in profile or full face. My mentor advised me that this series is really key to my work, and I should keep this because it represents the community. And she's right, I'm a community-based person. I like interacting with people, and meeting others is a part of who I really am. My religion is group-oriented and collective. My parents were also influenced by their Eastern roots, and so they were very neighborly and always had an open door to our home. The deaf community also shaped me. I didn't really have the opportunity to separate myself from the group and become an individual with a personality. This represents me and my partnerships. This is the cycle of life, from left to right. The far left is death, the middle is the dream world, and the right is life. There is a pregnant figure in the one on the right. You see the lines near the bottom of each frame, which represents the continuation of the earth. I really like this. It added an element of interest. You'll see this again in some of my later works. Again, I divide the space. The colors I chose were muted and dark. A woman who published a book wanted to use this artwork as her cover art, so I gave her permission. The name of the book, when translated into English, Earth's Generations and Deaf Culture, which exactly fits the mood and intent of this piece. This painting is from 2007. Some of the paintings are from longer ago, between 2002 and 2003. There were some that I started and I didn't finish, and when I was coming for the show, I chose several to complete to bring here for this exhibit. In those, I can see my past and my present converge. Some shapes and designs that I often used in the past have become combined with the techniques that I use in 2011. It's interesting to see them come together. This is from 2007, and this is one of those pieces. I chose to make this monochromatic. I chose the color red, and I was going to add pinks, but I realized it wasn't going to be successful. So I also used black, dark brown, and some gold. It was the first time I played with gold, and there's also some white. This is entitled a slow transformation. It indicates the passage of time for the completion of this piece, as well as the evolution of techniques applied to the piece. Most of my paintings, as I said, are unplanned. And I started this painting in the same way. If you step back and look at it, you can see the cycles, the changes over time. There are many situations that I've gone through in my life. For example, life as a woman. This is also representative of community. For example, in this face, there are many separate faces, indicating the many perspectives that are a part of me. As one person, I face the world every day, but as I interact with the world, all the varied perspectives become a part of me. That particular figure is holding on for all of the perspectives. There is a line cutting through the figure horizontally, and on the left is a vertical line. To the left is the past, and to the right is the future, or the continuous cycles through time. On their left, there is a pregnant woman that shows her growth during the stages of pregnancy. Each represents a stage of life and growth. Many people have asked me why figures of pregnant women show up in many of my pieces. They ask me if I want to become a mother or if it's a subconscious thing, maybe indicating that women give birth, and none of those are true. One time I met a hearing woman who asked me if I was pregnant, and really that's the story of my life. Often people ask me if I'm pregnant, and I guess I look pregnant? I don't know. But one woman told me that she saw a shape full of energy and light around my abdomen. She said that I had big projects coming and that I would be giving birth to a project. That comment made an impact on me, and I've incorporated that image in my work. So the image represents projects, or it could represent life experiences, or a new stage, or birth. Here on the bottom, the pregnant woman is she's in a holding pattern. She's asleep. She's waiting to give birth. The other figure on the left is growing through the stages of pregnancy. That particular figure's hair, it falls upward, sweeping above her head, and signifies her emotional reaction to the process. But it's not a literal depiction of pregnancy. It represents the progressing through life and life's experiences, those things that bring about transformation. To the right of this figure, you can see a tree stump. It was cut down, and there is another tree growing in the same space. That represents an individual's painful experiences, like the little deaths that occur in our lifetime and the subsequent rebirths. It's a loss that becomes a win, somewhat philosophical. In the background, there is a house with a domed roof. The facial elements, eyes, nose, and mouth, are the house's elements, windows, and doors. To the right of the center is a woman whose elements also comprise a female face. Similar to the figure with the many faces below holding things together, this figure holds the house together. She keeps it running and is the pillar of something, the pillar of her life. Her torso's features form the nose and the mouth of the face. The individuals to her left and right are the windows of the house that the woman is holding together and that comprises the face's eyes. Moons appear in several of my works. This moon is similar to the one in the Mutation 1, 2, and 3 series. I believe that it was in Mutation 1. A woman is holding onto the moon via a cord that suspends the moon. The moon is naive and innocent, and at the same time its eyes are fearful. It doesn't want the woman to let go. The moon controls the water, plants, and the earth's cycles, and the moon doesn't want sole control of that. It wants the woman to continue to hold on, to guide its processes. The same thing's happening here, but the moon is chained to the house, which is stronger than the flimsy cord in the Mutations piece. The moon could fall off its cord. This moon is strong and in control. As mentioned before, this woman holds the house together. The moon controls the earth's movement, and the woman is in control of the changes through life. Covered everything on the left side. On the far right, this face has a mouth that's mechanical. It's like a puppet. It's portraying the fact that the woman is not allowed to speak, where she wasn't allowed to say anything. She's oppressed. Here in her face, you can see that she wants to say something, and she's putting up a brave front, as if all is well, but she's crying and is in pain. To the far right is a proud woman who is holding a third eye. She's giving power and the sight of the third eye to the mechanical woman. The mechanical woman is suffering, and they each represent freedom and oppression and the tension between the two. There are people in the background behind the woman with the third eye. The woman is obviously a leader. She's not afraid to show her power. Her head is open on top, that spreads across the top right section of the painting, and the face with the closed eyes represents her subconsciousness. Her dress continues far beyond her body, which connects her to this lower figure, and it becomes the community's soil and water. Here there are figures of people sitting in conversation. They are outside the house directly to their left. In the corner, the figure waiting for the birth of the project is there. As she waits, her hair is growing like the branches on a tree. It, like the tree, is a symbol of rebirth, as in the tree on the left of the painting that was cut down to a stump and reborn. They're both similar in concept. The body of the woman is the tree itself. It's either a tree or a woman. In the corner is a snail, and it was the last element added to my painting. It was a slow process. I struggled with the title of this painting, and as I reflected on the painting process, it seemed very prolonged, as if it were progressing in slow motion. It was very personal, and it required a lot of patience. I wanted to incorporate the death to life, loss to gain concept. The snail represents the slow movement. However, the snail will arrive at its destination in spite of its lack of speed. And the snail can also see the whole painting and the whole story as well. I also incorporated complex color and tonal effects. I used 3D effects as well. I've always liked the ornamental patterns and shapes in architecture or on clothing. You can see it on my clothing. I love the architecture of churches and some Middle Eastern architecture as well. Montreal has unique architecture. There are some mosques and architectural elements that show up within my work, and you see them here in this painting as well. Here in the middle are small homes, and we can peer through their doors and see groups of people within each house. On the far right, the people in the background are supporting the woman in the foreground. I was the art, film, and theater coordinator for the Deaf Canada Conference. As part of my participation in the planning process, I was asked to do an illustration for the program book. This painting is the result of that. Over here on the right, you can see several white vertical lines. I wanted the design to look like frames on a film reel, but I wasn't happy with the look. It was a struggle for me. I erased the lines to clean it up and give it a uniform look, and on the right is a reproduction of the final design that was used as the front and back cover of the program book. The figures in the painting are holding hands and united. I chose blue because blue symbolizes Quebec, as does the fleur-de-lis. Everyone in this picture is on their way to the conference. My mother and I made this together. We had discussed collaborating on a project. She loves to sew. When thinking about potential projects, I suggested that we incorporate blue people, incorporating the same symbolism that was shown in the previous painting. Mom liked that idea. She's an expert sewer, but she doesn't understand how to design nor blend colors. So I designed the piece and its look, and she sewed all of the pieces together. We worked on it weekly for over a year. The blue people represent the community. I'm very proud of this work because it's one of a kind. My mother and I worked on it together. It took us a year to complete, and I will always cherish the time we spent together. Here's a picture of my mom. Thanks.